Oh.
Hello, thank you all for joining us. My name is Maya Korbik, and I'm the founder of Denari Financial Education Academy, whose mission is to provide fun, educational, and interactive tools for parents and caregivers to help them teach children financial literacy. My guest today is Brian Weisfeld. Did I pronounce? I didn't say it right. Did I?
Weisfeld.
Weisfeld. I'm sorry, Weisfeld.
That's
Weisfeld. Who is the founder and chief squad officer of the Startup Squad, an initiative dedicated to empowering girls to realize their potential and follow their dreams. He also co-authored the Startup Squad book series about friendship and entrepreneurship. Welcome, Brian, and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. And I'm a big fan of teaching kids about entrepreneurship and financial literacy. So love what you do and happy to support the cause and talk about the Startup Squad.
Perfect. And I actually love what you do. And I read a little bit about yourself, about you and your website. So you've always been entrepreneurial. And do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up in the financial literacy field?
Happy to. I've always, even as a kid, I was always running businesses. I was in sixth grade when I was about 11 or 12. I somehow bought 100 pounds of gummy bears and hired all my friends to sell them. I worked for a baseball card store. I had a steady 3 days a week babysitting gig. So I was always doing things as a kid. And then as an adult, I've helped entrepreneurs scale and build their businesses. So I was part of a 3-person team that bought IMAX in the early 1990s from the original founders and helped to turn it into the company that it is today. So I spent a fair bit of my time north of the border. My wife actually, her whole family is from Winnipeg, so I feel like I'm almost half Canadian at this point. And then I moved from New York to Silicon Valley probably about 12 years ago now to be the chief operating officer of coupons.com. And I helped to grow and build that company from about 100 people to 500 people and got it ready for its ultimate IPO. And I was just looking for the next company to help grow and scale. I was meeting with a lot of entrepreneurs and trying to find someone that was a good fit. But I've got 2 daughters, and I was inspired by them to start this initiative to get girls and boys as well interested in entrepreneurship.
Right. And so I have a question actually about your childhood, because you ended up buying, was it 100-pound bag of gummy bears?
Yeah.
So what prompted you to do that? Was it your parents? Did they influence you, or how did you become entrepreneurial at such a young age?
Yeah, I think, I was just always interested in different businesses. And, it was less about the, part of it was earning money for things that I wanted to buy for myself, but I was also always fascinated by business. So I remember every year Forbes does their 400 wealthiest Americans list. And I always used to buy that magazine because what was interesting to me was they always gave a little bit of a paragraph about each person and what their business was and how it started. And that to me was just fascinating to read about how all these people got inspired and the businesses that they started and then they created. It wasn't that I wanted to be on the list someday, but I just found it. It was what I was interested in. It was just this education about different people who started businesses. And so even then, when I was in high school, I worked for a local food store that was owned by a single entrepreneur, and he was looking for a second location. And I remember going with him. I was probably 15 or 16 at the time. I would go with him to scout out these other locations just because I was fascinated in just seeing how do you grow and build a business. So it's something that's always been inside of me.
Well, that's great. And I think it's really nice to have a mentor. I know for myself, sometimes I wish I had mentors that, I could have watched do business deals and learn from that, because this is something that, they don't really teach in school. And that's why I find, like, even with my own children, every time I'm negotiating a deal, like just recently I was on the phone with cell phone companies, and I purposefully did it in the car when we were driving. It was a 2-hour drive. And I purposefully did it in front of them just so that they could hear some of the conversation, or at least my end of the conversation.
Yeah.
And I tried explaining things. But I think it's nice that you had somebody when you were 15 that you could watch grow their business and sort of learn from them. What about your parents? Were they entrepreneurial, or somebody in your family?
No, not particularly. My father was an accountant. I guess he was this, an entrepreneurial accountant. And then my mother was a legal secretary and, spent a lot of time home helping to raise us. So I think it was just something I was always interested in.
Yeah, I think some people are born entrepreneurs. It's not for everybody. And it's actually interesting because one of our workshops is on entrepreneurship. And I remember I was teaching it to grade 8s, and I was explaining how, actually, just going back to your story about gummy bears, I find it very interesting. I'll come back to my story, but I want to actually just ask you this. I find it very interesting that at such a young age, you did not go out and sell all the gummy bears by yourself, but you actually hired people to do that for you. I mean, that is true entrepreneurship. How did you come up with that idea? Do you remember?
I wish I did. I also wonder how an 11 or 12-year-old kid got his hands on 100 pounds of gummy bears. I wish I knew how I did it. But, I think it was just a matter of I realized there was a risk. I mean, I'd spent a lot of money getting these 100 pounds of gummy bears, and I ended up selling them to these friends of mine and let them, they were essentially, I basically put them in business. They would buy the gummy bears from me, and then they would go and sell them. And I kept my own stash that I would keep on my own. And so I guess I was getting wholesale and retail margins without really knowing what either of those two terms meant.
Wow, I really like that story. That's amazing. But I really do believe some people are born to be entrepreneurs, and it's not for everybody. So just going back to my story, I was teaching this workshop and I was explaining to grade 8s what entrepreneurship is. And then I was telling them, I said, you can build a system where, the system is working for you. So it's sort of like a passive income. Basically, you can go on vacation and you don't necessarily need to be involved in that business all the time. The business can operate without you. And I remember clearly this one child, he must have been 14, maybe 15, I don't know. But he said to me, he's like, "Miss, I don't want to do that." And I said, "What do you mean? You can make lots of money." And he's just like, "You know what, miss, that's not for me. It's too much of a headache." And he just knew right then and there that was not for him. And I really admired that because I love entrepreneurship. I think for me, it was kind of squashed a little bit at an early age, just because of my background and where I come from, and how I was raised. But I really think it's important that parents, if they see that in their child, that their child is entrepreneurial, that they encourage it and that they take certain steps to help that come to fruition.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think what's also interesting is, the idea of having it in you. I think part of that, some of it can be developed, in particularly that tolerance for risk, because obviously, entrepreneurship is risky. And so I've had, I know very successful people who late in their career have said to me, "Well, I've got this great idea for a business, but I'm just not sure if I'm comfortable taking the risk and leaving my cushy corporate job to do it." And I thought I found that really fascinating, because these are people that you would look at and say, "Wow, they're really successful," but they weren't comfortable with that risk. And so that's one of the things that I talk about is this isn't that every kid should grow up to be an entrepreneur, but I just feel so strongly that the kids with that entrepreneurial mindset that are comfortable with risk and failure and see opportunities instead of problems and learn these basic business skills, they are going to be more successful in life regardless of the path they choose. And that's the goal with the Startup Squad, is not that every kid should grow up to be an entrepreneur, but entrepreneurship as a way to learn some of these life skills today is so valuable. I mean, there's these statistics that 65% or 70% of all the jobs that our kids are going to grow up to fill haven't yet been created. So the question is, how do you train someone for a job that doesn't exist yet? You train them how to think. That's what you can do, is you can train them how to think and train them to get comfortable with different variables and comfortable with things changing and comfortable with failure and comfortable with trying new things. And those are the things that you can do. Train your kid to think today, and they've got a much greater opportunity of being successful down the road.
Right. And is that what your books are about? Is it about those kind of skills that the girls are learning? I'm actually going to, I should say it quietly because my daughter's downstairs, but I will be ordering those books for her for Christmas. You know, I really look forward to reading them with her. And do you want to tell us a little bit more about your books?
Yeah, sure. And let me also make this offer to you as well as to all your listeners. If you are buying the book as a gift for your kids, send us an email to info@thestartupsquad.com.
Okay.
And do that. Give me your address and the name of the child you're buying the book for, and I'll sign a book plate, a little sticker that you can put inside, and then you can give her or give your child a signed book plate. So just email me at info@thestartupsquad.com, and I make that available to any of your listeners or people in your Facebook group as well.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Sure. So the books are, it's a novel series about these 4 6th grade girls. In the first book, their class is going on a field trip to the local amusement park. And to raise money for the field trip, all the kids get put into teams, and each team has to start their own lemonade stand. And whichever team raises the most money, those kids get the VIP tickets to the lemonade stand. They get to cut to the front of to the amusement park. They get to cut to the front of the line. And so these 4 girls get thrown together on a team. They're not friends. They don't even like each other, but they have to figure out how to work together and how to run this lemonade stand. And as you'd expect, it's a lot of disasters and pitfalls and humor in the book as they do this. And what we purposely did is the book itself, the narrative itself, is really light on the business stuff. When I was doing this, I realized that if kids get the slightest sense that you're trying to teach them something, then they're done. They won't continue. And so what I say is you've got to bake the broccoli into the brownies, so to speak.
Right.
And so the books themselves, are very light on the business stuff and much heavier on the friend issues and family issues and school issues and pet issues and those sorts of things you'd expect in a novel written for 7 to 14-year-old kids. But what we do is in the back of the book, we have a nonfiction section where we refer back to the narrative. So we say, hey, do you remember when the kids were making a big sign for their lemonade stand? Well, that's actually called marketing. And this is what marketing is. And here's some marketing tips you can use for your business. And so each book, we give the kids actual business lessons and we draw it from the narrative. Because what I've found is the key to education in this sort of thing is combining that left and right brain thinking for kids, right? You can explain to a kid what marketing is, and they may or may not remember it. But if they read a story about a girl who made a sign for her lemonade stand that's so big she couldn't even carry it down the street, and then you explain that's marketing, that they'll remember. And so that's the key to what we do. And so each book talks about different business concepts. So in the first book, we cover sales, marketing, merchandising, and location. The second book, we cover revenue, profit, negotiation, and customer service. And we're working on our third book now, which will come out in May, in which we talk about choosing a business that matches your interests and also creating a business plan. And so then the last thing we do, the last part of the book is we actually have an interview with a girl entrepreneur. And so we want the kids to realize that just because they're starting a small business, it doesn't have to be a small business. It could turn into something bigger. And so we've got an interview with an actual girl entrepreneur in the back of each of our books.
That sounds amazing. And, I do agree with you because I know when we teach our workshops, it's the same kind of thing. We can't teach the actual concepts. Everything is taught through games. And then we sort of revert back and say, hey, this is how, this relates to banking and bank fees and whatever we're teaching. We have to do it in a fun way because otherwise the children they don't listen. I think adults don't listen. When it comes to money is one of those topics that's really scary for a lot of people. And a lot of people are turned off by it. Well,
also we are conditioned as humans to, pay more attention to stories. And so if you can turn whatever you're teaching into a story, then the kids are going to be that, kids and adults will much more likely, remember what you're talking about.
Right. And it sounds like you're covering a lot of very interesting topics and skills in your books. I mean, negotiation, that's a huge one. That's one where I feel I have learned a lot in the last couple of years, but definitely this was not a skill that I learned when I was a child or even in my early adult life. I learned a lot from my husband, who is in sales, so he's actually very good at that. So I've read a lot of books on selling, but the latest book I read, and I'm not sure if you had a chance to read it, it's called Never Split the Difference.
No.
Oh, that book changed my life. And you know what? My husband has so much experience in this area, but once he read this book, he started applying it in his own business. And it actually made a huge difference.
I'm writing that down right now.
Right. Never Split the Difference. The author is a former, I was going to say FBI. No, he's a CIA negotiator. He negotiated with terrorists and bank robbers. And I mean, he has so much experience and it's very, very interesting. But I definitely think this is the one thing that we need to teach our children.
Yeah, and to your point, the story that you were telling earlier about being on the phone, I think was you said with the cable company with your daughter in the car. So I had the same exact experience. I was driving with my older daughter who's 15, and my wife had just brought her car in for service. And so she called me and she said, "Hey, the tires are in bad shape," and they said we definitely have to replace 2 of them now, but at some point we have to replace all 4. And she was talking about the economics, and I said, "Well, see if they'll cut you a better deal if you replace all 4 tires. Right now they give you a discount on it or something." And I hung up the phone and my daughter was like, how'd you do that? And I was like, "What do you mean?" I said, "I don't know. I would just feel so weird asking for something like that." And I said, "Well, all the worst that can happen is they would say no."
No.
And so it was really interesting. I had almost the same exact experience that you had as well.
Right. And in the Facebook group that I mentioned that I've created, we actually talked about that because I've been challenging some of the members to actually ask for discounts. And so the cell phone plan, I mean, I saved $475 annually just because I negotiated with them.
Amazing.
Right. And then after that, I tackled our insurance. I consolidated everything. That was another $2,000. So I was on a roll. And then I even ended up going, I'm a runner. So I ended up going to a running room store. I was not planning on buying more than 1 pair of running shoes, but they had a sale. So I needed a few other things. So I just asked, I said, "Hey, can you give me a discount?" And the lady gave me 10% discount. And I was trying to explain to the people in the Facebook group, I said, "Listen, this is hard for me too. Every part of my body is screaming inside. I'm so ashamed. Like, I just want to disappear." But at the end of the day, like, I actually I've never really had anybody say no to me when I've asked. I'm sure that their no is going to come sometime, but the least I could do is ask. So I do that, and I do it in front of my kids just because I want them to see me do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
So anyhow, but I wanted to ask, so I know you have 2 daughters and the books are about girls. Are you planning on doing any books about the boys and entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so one of the things that we say is we are girl targeted, but boy inclusive. There's certainly nothing anti-boy about what we're doing. It just happens to be a book that's about 4 girls. And so I speak to schools and libraries and co-ed groups of kids all across the country. And so we've had, we've got boys and girls reading the book. But one of the things I do feel strongly about is I think that it's as important for boys to read about girls as entrepreneurs as it is for girls.
Mm-hmm.
And so, so the Startup Squad is going to be these 4 girls, because I just think that it's, happy to reach boys and girls, but I think it's more important for girls to have this. And in part of my creating it was just seeing a lot of the influences out there for my daughters and wanting there to be more empowering things like what we created.
Did you teach your daughters some of these skills that you're describing in the book?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So part of the inspiration for the book was my daughters. It was my older daughter when she was 8 was selling Girl Scout cookies and also running a charity bake sale with a friend of hers. And both times she was so excited to be doing it, but it was clear she didn't know what to do. And my wife was the one that actually said to her, "Hey, you got to look people in the eye when you talk to them, and make sure to say good morning when people walk by to get their attention, and tell people the money goes to charity, because even if they don't want to buy a brownie, maybe they'll still give you a few bucks." And
Right.
so what was interesting was, we've got yeah, lemonade stands and bake sales are sort of pretty common in our driveway. At least they were before the pandemic. And I've just seen it in my own daughters, how that has helped them grow and become more comfortable in just speaking to people and give them greater self-confidence. And I just think it's such a wonderful education. A lot of kids are shy and not comfortable in talking to other adults. And but when you're standing, the best way to teach them is standing behind that table and selling their baked goods or the lemonade or whatever it happens to be. And it's a great education. So I've seen that with my own daughters.
Oh, that's great. And what are some other lessons that you're planning on teaching them, or have you taught them in addition to the lessons from your books when it
So
comes to financial literacy?
yeah, so we've definitely talked about the spend some, save some, share some, which I think is a great lesson for kids to understand that there should be different pockets, to think of their money in different pockets as they get it, whether it's money they earn or their allowance, to spend. Have a portion of it they'll spend for themselves, have a portion of it they put away for their future or reinvest back into their business, then have a portion that they're sharing with those who are less fortunate. I think, at some point I want to start to work with them on budgeting and setting a budget for what the things that they want to have and they want to spend. I'm a believer that, if you think of just parenting when kids are infants, you're making 100% of the decisions for them. But
Right.
when they go off to school and university and go off on their own, they've got to make 100% of the decisions on their own. And so my job as a parent is to help them along that continuum. And I think budgeting is certainly a part of it that I'd want them to have by the time that they leave the house. And so that's certainly something I want to start to do with them.
Right. And I feel the same way. I feel absolutely the same way when it comes to my own children. I feel that I need to slowly transition certain decisions and certain responsibilities for me onto them. And when it comes to money, that's definitely what we have been doing since they were little. We give them a little bit more and more responsibility as they get older. And that's also part of what I teach in some of my parent workshops. Where we try to challenge parents to think of allowance not as a reward, but usually as a tool that actually helps parents or helps children learn about money while dollar values are low and the risks are low. So the idea is that, you would basically give this money to your children and then they decide how to spend it. Although I have to say, sometimes it's very hard as a parent to watch them spend it on things that you don't really want them to buy.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think we'll try to see that, like my daughter will see something that she wants to buy and sort of explain, well, all right, how many weeks worth of your allowance is that, or how many cups of lemonade would you have to sell to get that? And it's going
Yeah.
to cover 3 or 4 months. Is that really what you want to spend your money on right now? And
Yeah.
so no, I think that's it's definitely a challenge, but sometimes you just got to let them make their own mistakes and learn those lessons the hard way.
Yeah, and I like the way you're thinking, because this is one thing I try to explain to my kids. It's always like, convert the value of whatever it is that you're buying into how many weeks of allowance, or as you said, how many cups of lemonade you have to sell, or if it's a part-time job, how many hours you have to work. But I'm not talking about hourly salary. I'm talking about after-tax
Yeah.
dollars that you get paid, right? So I think this was one thing that I learned much later on in life. So once I started converting things that way, I realized there were some things I really was not ready to spend my money on.
Yeah,
So
no, absolutely. And I think for a kid, right, it's hard for a kid to get their head around the difference between $5 and $10. But if you say, it's 1 week versus 2 weeks, or, as I said, an extra 5 cups of lemonade, it has a bigger impact.
Right, right. And I was going to ask, just to switch the topics a little bit and just go back to your childhood. I feel like I didn't finish asking all the questions, but did your parents teach you about money? I mean, I know you said they were not exactly true entrepreneurs, even though your dad was an accountant and he had his own business, but did they teach you about money? Did they spend time and explain things?
Yeah, so I was also always very good at math. Just numbers always came much easier to me, much more so than names. I still struggle with names, and I just wish if everyone was assigned a number, it would be much easier for me to remember everyone. But at an early age, I must have been in my mid-teens, maybe 15, 16. My mother basically turned over responsibility to me to balance the family checkbook.
Oh, okay.
And so that was, so when I was in my, I guess, I think starting at 15 or 16, that was my job, is we'd get the bank statement and I would have to balance the family checkbook. And so that was an early lesson in seeing dollars coming in and dollars coming out, and also just reconciling what we thought we spent with what we actually spent. So that was a great lesson. And I'd say, I don't know if I still balance my checkbook. I don't know if it's something that people still do nowadays. But that was for me, just a great education.
Is that something you might transfer over to one of your daughters one day?
It's a very good question. I think it's something that I still do. And so passing it off to someone, I think would be good for me and for them, just to get it off of my plate.
Yeah. How old are your daughters?
15 and 13 now, or about to turn 15, about to turn 13.
Oh, okay. Okay. So do you see them continuing to become entrepreneurs, or do you see them getting jobs, at least maybe part-time jobs for now?
So they actually both use entrepreneurship as a way to meet their other goals or their other interests. So for example, my older daughter is very passionate about the environment and climate change. And so she was the co-leader of her middle school's climate awareness club. And to raise money for the club, she actually ran a lemonade stand at our book launch and used that to pay for the entrance fee into our local town's Art and Wine Festival. She and her friends were the only kids, I think, maybe ever to have a booth at this Art and Wine Festival. And at their booth, they raised awareness of their club, raised money for their club, and raised awareness of climate change. And they sold these environmentally themed gifts. And so she's used entrepreneurship as a way to further those passions and those interests. And then my younger daughter, she's the one that before the pandemic, we've had bake stands and lemonade stands in front of our house quite often. She a lot of times would be using that to raise money for causes that she cares quite a bit about, which is actually an interesting tangent. I spoke at the National Conference of Girls' Schools. They had a summer conference, it must have been last summer, 2019. And I spoke on a panel, and afterwards I was approached by the headmaster of a girls' school, who said to me, can you do me a favor? I think it's important that we impress upon girls that it's okay to start a business because they want to make money for themselves. And we had this really interesting discussion, which I realized as well is that I don't know if it's whether the altruism gene is stronger in girls, or girls just find it they're just less comfortable in doing things to raise money. But a lot of girls will start a business because they want to raise money for local animal shelter or disease or a food bank, which is all fantastic. Those are great causes. But at the same time, what he was saying to me was, we want to make sure that girls realize it's okay to make money to start a business because they want to just make money for themselves.
Right.
And actually, in our third book in the series, we're gonna introduce that. Some of the characters are going to be starting businesses just because they want to raise money. And so, I've had that same thing with my daughter, where she'll have a cause that she wants to raise money for, which is great. But at the same time, saying, okay, but is there anything that you want for yourself, not to take away from that. And what we'll usually do then is we'll then match the money that she raises for the charity, will match. So this way she doesn't feel like she's cheating the charity, but at the same time, she's also, we're starting to realize that she can earn money for herself.
Right. And it's really interesting. I've got 2 points to make based on what you just said. The first one is, I would say maybe 6 years ago, I was teaching at this was a private school, but they were doing this pilot and they were ending it, but they had this one, it was actually grade 3, and they had girls class and boys class. And they were just sort of testing it out. And I was teaching financial literacy workshops for the whole school. So I ended up going from class to class. And it was so interesting to see the difference between boys and the girls. And I'm a woman, and I feel bad to say this, but this is just my experience. I can't speak that this is everywhere. But the boys were on it. I started the workshop. They started asking questions right away. They were so interested. They really, really wanted to learn about money. And they knew so much more than a typical co-ed grade 3 class. The girls, on the other hand, the girls class, it was so cute. I came there, the first 5 minutes, they were complimenting me on my outfit. They liked my hair, they liked my jewelry. We had this nice little chat. And then we started talking about money. And they weren't as assertive as the boys. They knew definitely a lot less than the boys that were the same age. And it just made me sad a little bit, because I don't know if this is because we as parents don't talk enough to our girls about money, or is it just genes or whatever it is. This is just my experience. I don't know if it's like that everywhere else. And the second thing I wanted to mention, I was actually, I worked as a CFO of a private all-girls Catholic school here in Mississauga for almost 7 years. And it's really interesting because sometimes I would actually teach some workshops there. And I actually was always very careful too, because again, it's that trying to tell the girls that it's okay to make money, but also, it's a Catholic school, it's a religious school. So it's trying not to go overboard or say something that's inappropriate, because people have different views on money, and people are growing up in different families. So it's, some families are very sensitive and they view money very differently. So I can totally see how sometimes girls can think that, it's okay to raise money for charity, but I don't want to be greedy, and I don't want to raise money or start a business just to earn money for me, because that may seem selfish.
Yeah, and to your point about the boys and the girls, reacting differently, I think part of it is the influences that the girls see, and that was part of the inspiration for me starting the Startup Squad. Is part of it, as I said, was seeing my own daughter struggle selling Girl Scout cookies. But the moment of inspiration came when I was laying in bed reading books with my girls, and my older daughter was on my right side, and she was reading from the Who Was series, these biographies that are written for kids that are just so well done. And so she was reading Who Was Queen Elizabeth. My younger daughter was in kindergarten, and so I was reading to her, and the book she wanted me to read that day was just yet another pink princess fairy rainbow unicorn book. And I just got tired of all of that lowest common denominator marketing to girls. And look, I absolutely give those books a ton of credit, because they help my daughter's imagination, and they make her want to learn how to read. But my older daughter was getting that exact same benefit while she was learning about Queen Elizabeth. And so I just wanted there to be more empowering influences for girls. And so that was part of the inspiration. And I think as we, with books like the Startup Squad and other things that we can do just to give girls positive role models and put this information in front of them, there's no reason why they shouldn't take to it as much as the boys do.
Right. And yeah, I feel it's also important to sometimes praise certain female entrepreneurs that are, they're known, but some of them are not that well known. So I always try to point out some of them to my daughter, just so that she has some interesting female role models to look up to. Go
Yeah,
ahead, sorry.
absolutely. No, that's great. And I think on our, one of the things that we do, that's part of the reason why we have the girl entrepreneur profiled in the back of our book. And also on our website, at thestartupsquad.com, we have a tab called Girl CEOs. And we have videos of 70 different girls between the ages of 7 and 17 who've all started their own businesses. And so girls can go to, and boys can go to that website, our website, and see these videos of girls who are actually running their own businesses and click through and check out their websites and their social media profiles and all those other things. And it's just about giving them examples of other people that have done the same thing.
That is so amazing. I really, really love that. And I think your books, they sound like they're a great resource for the children that want to be entrepreneurs, and then your website. Are there any other tips that you have for parents whose children have that entrepreneurial inclination? Like, what can these parents do to help their children, just maybe start businesses or cultivate certain skills to be one day to hopefully one day be successful entrepreneurs?
A couple of things. First is the best businesses for kids are ones that relate to things that they're already interested in, right? If your kid loves animals, having them start a pet sitting business or something related to animals, they're going to be that much more passionate about it, have more fun, and be more successful. So I think that's the first thing, is try to align the business that they start with what they're interested in. And then the second is just let them take those risks, let them make mistakes, let them fail, even if you see it coming, because they're going to learn so much more from it than if you stop them part way. They're not going to remember that you course corrected them, but they will remember the failure. And when I talk to kids in school groups across the country, one of the things I say to the kids is, entrepreneurs don't say win some, lose some. Entrepreneurs say win some, learn some. Because they know even if they fail, they're going to learn something that's going to help them succeed the next time. And I take them through examples of famous people that have failed. Kids look up to these celebrities and successful business people, and they think it was all so easy. They don't understand the failures. And so let your kids fail, let them learn from those failures, and share your failures with them. When you're sitting around the dinner table, talk about something you really messed up that day. So they realize that failure happens, but you learn from it and are better for it.
Right. And I totally agree with you. I think it's so important to teach our kids that it's okay to fail as long as they learn from it. I try to do that with my kids all the time. If they bring tests home, honestly, I don't even look at the mark. I just tell them, okay, let's just go together through things that you did wrong, and let's make sure we understand why you did them wrong so that you don't repeat the same mistakes. But I think teaching our kids to be comfortable with failure is so important. It gives them grit, it gives them resilience. There is a great book by this author called Carol Dweck.
Sure.
Have you read
Mindset.
it?
Yeah,
Mindset, yes.
Yeah.
That is such an amazing book. I think once I read that book, I totally sort of pivoted in a different direction when it came to parenting my children. So I definitely try to teach them that, it's okay to fail. We're all here to grow. And sometimes when we fail, that could be the best thing that have happened to us, right? We can grow so much from that failure.
Yeah.
Right. So anyways, any other tips?
No, I think, those are the ones that come to mind. And I think the programs like yours and books like the Startup Squad, these are all things that are going to help to help us all raise kids that are more financially literate, and also have that entrepreneurial mindset and a much better chance of being successful in life, regardless of the path that they choose.
Oh, that's perfect. And Brian, do you want to tell my followers and my Facebook group members where they can find you?
Yeah, certainly. So our website is thestartupsquad.com, and we are on every social media platform at The Startup Squad. And as I said before, if you send an email to info@thestartupsquad.com with your address and name of your child, we'd be more than happy to send you a signed book plate and throw in some bookmarks and stickers and those sorts of things as well.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us today. And I actually look forward to reading your book, and I'll definitely be contacting you and letting you know what my daughter learns from it.
I look forward to it.
Thank you.